All right, we'll call the May 24th meeting of the Caroline County Board of Supervisors to order. Let the record show that all board members are present. Mr. Underwood representing Reedy Church, Mr. Popowitz representing Port Royal, Mr. Seeley representing Bowling Green, Mr. Akers representing Madison, and I'm Floyd Thomas representing Mattaponi. Mr. Popowitz, would you give us the invocation, please?
Yes, sir. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, I want to thank you tonight for all that you do for us and the citizens of Caroline. Be with those who are less fortunate. Help us make the decisions that we need to make that are pleasing in your sight. And be with those who defend our country and our freedoms, and those who defend our freedoms here at home as well. For all these things we pray. Amen.
Amen. If you'll join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. Yeah, it looks like it. Okay. That's what I thought you did. Okay, opening board comments or amendments to the agenda. Mr. Parton, we have no real amendments to the agenda, right? We have those two, Brian. I'm gonna make sure we do those for board comments. But we do have two items that Mr. Parton's note asked that we add to the consent agenda, which is basically two resolutions. I'm gonna address those at board comments. And it's just to give Mr. Parton and staff the opportunity to create those resolutions and have those delivered, since we won't meet until the events have happened again. So I'll take care of that at board comments. So there's nothing else we need to add? Okay, thank you. Mr. Underwood, any board comments?
No, sir.
Ms. Popowitz?
I have none.
Mr. Seeley?
I have one comment. I have had constituents ask, and we've received a letter from a group of them about the redistricting and the reconsideration, and they would just like us to take a look at that and get the consequences and what could the potential consequences be from the attorney in closed session.
You have some citizens that would like to meet with the board in closed session?
No, just would they like us to get some advice from the county attorney, and would still like us to reconsider.
We have closed meetings today, we do. All right, since we are going to be in closed session, I think we can briefly discuss that in closed session. Okay, is that it? Is that it?
For now, yes, sir.
Okay. Mr. Akers, board comments?
Mr. Chairman, I was asked over the weekend about the All-American Cities logo, as to it has disappeared off of our website, it has disappeared off of the tourism information. And so I spoke with Mr. Wilson last evening about what happened, and it appears that someone in the administration had suggested that the coming or recommended that come off. I believe it's important that we have it on our letterheads. I think it's something we need to have on the website. I think it's something we need to have on any literature that goes out of the tourism office or even out of the county office, because that designation is extremely important to Carrollton County. And so you and I talked about it today earlier. I just think it's something we should ask staff to do.
Mr. Chairman, if it's all right, may I make an additional comment?
Ms. Popowitz?
Yeah, I think that what's probably not known is that this designation is important, but also that we're not eligible to go back for 10 years to apply. Is that correct, Mr.?
We can go back before 10 years.
Yeah.
We don't have to wait 10 years. But the award is not, it does not expire.
Yes.
We could never go back if we did not want to, and it would still be, Caroline County would be considered a All-American Cities county.
Okay.
And so it does not expire. There's no expiration date.
Okay.
In fact, you go up down 95 and you see some localities lumped in North Carolina stands out to be. They wanted it in 1997.
Right.
Yes.
And they still published that they are an All-American City recipient. So I just think it's important.
We could have gone back the very next year.
Right.
You know, according to their rules, what we would have had to have is some new programs that would have allowed us to participate and possibly win.
I see.
But it is, and Wayne is right, we did discuss this today, because I think he found out from somebody and I found out from somebody else who was on the committee that it had disappeared. And I think it's a great marketing tool that we need to use for not only tourism, but for businesses. It's something that's really good. And I don't think we've really understood the gravity of what we accomplished. You know, we're one of maybe 6 counties or cities in Virginia that have ever won this award. So I mean, to say we're an all-America city says we do some things for the citizens that nobody else in the Commonwealth does. I think we're the last ones who've won in 10 years, if it's not more than that. So I mean, it's a good thing. I think since we discussed that, we ought to make sure we get a majority of the board to say, yes, we ought to move forward, or put that back. And if that's the majority of the board's will, I think we'll go ahead and do that.
Mr. Chairman,
So,
if you
yes,
want to
yes.
vote, I would- yes.
I think we've got 5 heads that nodded, so Mr. Parton, I'm going to ask you to take care of that. Okay. Were you finished, Ms. Akers?
Yes, sir.
That was your one? Okay. I did have the same comment. We were going to bring up the All-America Cities. I think we discussed that enough. I'd ask Mr. Parton to add to the agenda as consent agenda items, basically 2 resolutions, and you have it kind of in your packet, which is the yellow piece. We're going to add 2 resolutions one is for Loving Day, which is actually June 12th, and that's a commemoration of Mildred and Richard Loving and the historic civil rights case that they had. And it's important that since those celebrations are done across the country, Caroline's their home, and they're both unfortunately gone, but I go to church with Mrs. Loving's daughter and asked her about that, and I think it would be great if we had a resolution from the county that we would present to her. We could do it here, or I could do it in church, or somewhere. She's kind of shy, so we'll make it, you know, not a big public thing, but I think it's a thing the county needs to do for her. And if there's no problem with that, we'll make sure we do that. And the other one is the AP Hill 70th anniversary. I think there's going to be a lot of celebrations within the county. We need to have a county resolution that basically commemorates that. And the last one, again, I just saw the president of Caroline's Promise. For those of you who don't know, it's Linda Thomas. She was outside. They had a Caroline Promise meeting. And Caroline's Promise was organized September 2001, right after 9/11. And at that meeting, Mrs. Alma Powell came to commemorate Caroline's startup of the program, and I understand that it's possible that Mrs. Powell may come back again, and it's possible Mrs. Powell and Mrs. Obama and probably the governor of Virginia all at least have invitations. I wanted to make the board aware, just like I did in the work session, we will probably have some additional responsibilities if they come. So I think it would be great for Caroline if that happens. I'd love to see it. It's not confirmed yet, but according to Mrs. Powell's scheduler, she's clearing her calendar to try to make it. So I think that'll be a good thing. So that's it for me for board comments. Agenda item number 1 is presentations of reports. Chief Lehman, is that you? Department of Fire and Rescue Volunteer Workforce Initiative.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, good evening. I am pleased to announce that Caroline County Fire Rescue has been selected by the Virginia State Fire Chiefs Association as one of 20 departments within the Commonwealth to participate in a federally funded program to develop a first-of-a-kind model to achieve and sustain adequate levels of fire rescue service volunteer staffing. The Volunteer Workforce Solution program is being led by the Virginia Association of Fire Chiefs, who identified the needs of the departments within Virginia to seek new solutions and to address the continuing downward trends of volunteerism within the Commonwealth. The Virginia State Fire Chiefs Association secured this grant through a safer opportunity as well. Our recruitment campaign is entitled, "Do You Have What It Takes?" and it kicks off tonight. And with that, I've got a small work group being led by Deputy Chief Mark Garnett to kind of give you a briefing on that. So I'd ask Chief Garnett to come on up, Mr. Nault and Lieutenant.
Good evening. It's nice to be up in front of you. It's been a while. So any opportunity, though, I can do that. So I'm joined this evening with Emergency Services Commission member Pam Chenault, as well as Lieutenant Ernest, and we're very excited to be kicking off our recruitment campaign entitled, Do You Have What It Takes? Caroline was selected as one of 20 jurisdictions to participate in a recruitment study to attract new volunteer fire and EMS providers in our system. Volunteers, as you know, are vital to the success of our fire and rescue system as well as our local economy. In fact, the Virginia Department of Fire Programs estimates that communities save on an average of $45,000 per volunteer. This federally funded study is the first of its kind evaluating traditional versus GIS-based recruitment. Caroline will participate as one of the 10 traditional campaigns. At the end of our study, our success will be judged against those participating in scientific GIS marketing-based recruitment campaigns. This will help identify future recruitment both here in Virginia as well as across the entire country. Regardless of our role, all participants, including Caroline, will receive our own community GIS data at the end of the study. With that, we will be receiving printed posters, flyers, banners, website artwork, buck slips, and brochures at no cost. And I provided you in your packet a draft proof of what our brochure may look like. Much of this recruitment material, for the first time, will feature a QR scanner code for direct access by smartphones. I had to do a little research. I had seen those little boxes on ads. We're going to have those boxes, and mobile phone users can scan those codes and will be directly taken to a mobile website to request additional information. We've also acquired a new recruitment website address. It's carolinefirerescue.org without spaces, and this has been set up to provide volunteer recruiting information and a little easier website to navigate to. We have Lieutenant Ernest on our staff that's working on the staff member to coordinate this project, and he's assembled a team of volunteers as well as the full support of our Emergency Service Commission members, and they are planning a number of exciting recruitment events in the coming months. And I look forward to returning to you next year to provide you with an update on the success of our campaign. I certainly appreciate your time. Be glad to answer any questions that we can.
Board members have any questions at this time? No questions?
The box isn't on this one because I don't see it.
No.
Okay.
No, and I had hoped to have the final material this evening, and we found out from our printer that they've had a slight delay of a few days. So.
Okay.
All right. That was it, Ms. Steele? Mr. Akers?
No.
Mr. Garnett, how much was this grant for again?
The total funding of the grant was just shy of $1 million for the 20 jurisdictions. There's been quite a few estimates if you had to go out and hire your own GIS services to provide the study independently, as well as the tens of thousands of colored printed material items that we'll be receiving, that was valued somewhere in the neighborhood of $250,000. So we've obviously never had the opportunity to make this much of an investment in recruitment materials before. So we're all really excited about it. This is an opportunity that I've never had, and we're really looking forward to going out and promoting it.
So that'll be quite a bit of an increase in what your normal county budget was for recruiting, won't it?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right, we look forward to that. Ms. Chenault, great to have you. Is there anything you wanted to add?
No, I'm just amazed. I'm just amazed at the technology that's gone into this too. The stats that they were able to pull up from each county, and that we were a part of this. The technological skills are just amazing to me. It's wonderful.
Well, thank you for being here, and Chief, Mr. Garnett, we really appreciate your hard work. Thanks a lot for all you guys have done.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, I understand Dr. Kilo will not be here until after our 7:30 break or after 7:30, so we're going to come back to him. Agenda item number 2 is appointments, and I think we had a couple of appointments that were due. thank you. We've got Rappahannock Area Community Services Board. Warren Samuel was there. He had an interest of continuing.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. I would recommend that we allow him to continue to serve.
I'll second Mr. Wood's motion.
The motion's made by Mr. Underwood, seconded by Mr. Akers to, I guess, we're saying reappoint Mr. Samuels to the Community Services Board for a 3-year term.
Correct.
Discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Motion carries. Germana, which was not on the agenda, but is one that we needed to add. It's in the packet. Sherry Gravitz serves as the county's representative to Germana, and I've spoken to Mrs. Gravitz many times, and she's very enthusiastic and would like to stay there, so I guess we might as well. If there's a motion to keep Mr. Gravitz, I'd appreciate it.
I'll
So
make
move,
a
Mr. Chairman.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Underwood, seconded by Mr. Seeley.
second.
Okay, discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. That motion carries. And we have appointments for the Recreation Advisory Committee that will expire June 30th. And I was just thinking, we don't have Mr. Howard here, but I guess we'll make these appointments, and then if we're redistricted, we'll make another appointment, or that person will make more appointments, so. Okay, these end in June. If anybody's ready now, we'll take those now. If they're not, we will need to have these for our meeting in June.
Mr. Park, if I can, Mr. Chairman, do you know whether the representative from Madison has indicated that they do not wish to serve, or if they did not hear?
Have not heard from your representative.
I'll talk to him.
Okay, so does anybody have a recreational advisory committee?
Mr. Wick, I'm sure it looks like he wants to continue. He has just been appointed recently, and if it pleases the board, I'd like to go ahead and make a motion that Mr. Wick stay on that committee.
Well, I think Mr. Wick's there.
Yeah.
The other ones that we're looking for. I mean, you've got Mr. Wick and, right? Oh, he still needs to be reappointed. Okay, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Is there a second?
I second.
Okay. Mr. Popowitz motions that Mr. Wick be reappointed. Mr. Akers seconds. Discussion, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, that motion carries unanimously. So we've got Mr. Tillman as an at-large member who said he wanted to serve continuously. So is there a motion for Mr. Tillman?
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman, I make that motion. That we
Second.
reappoint Mr.
Okay,
Tillman.
Mr. Underwood motions, Mr. Seeley seconds to reappoint Mr. Tillman as the at-large member. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
That motion carries. And then the other ones we'll need is one from Bowling Green, Madison, Mattapanai, Reedy Church, another at-large member, a student representative, and a school representative. And Mr. Parton is actively trying to contact those, and you'll touch base with the school board to make sure we get a school representative and a student representative. So we'll try to come back with those on the 14th of June, if we can. Okay, the consent agenda. We caught right up. Is there anything that board members would like to pull from the consent agenda, which now includes items A through L as you have, M and N for the 2 additional resolutions we're going to ask staff to prepare?
I have questions on item E, Mr. Chairman.
Questions on item E? Fire and rescue personal protective equipment. Anything else?
That's it, Mr. Chairman.
Motion to approve the consent agenda minus item E would be in order?
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Popowitz, seconded by Mr. Underwood. Consent agenda consists of items A through L as stated on the agenda, plus M and N, resolutions for Loving Day and the AP Hill 70th anniversary. So, we're not going to vote on E. All those in favor of the other consent agenda items say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. This consent agenda carries unanimously with the exception of item E. Mr. Seeley, your questions are?
Mr. Chairman, I just noticed that the total amount on this grant was $275,679, and that was the number that we talked about for the cannery for actually rehabbing that for the gear washer and dryer situation. And I'm curious, is this the same grant for that, or is this a different grant? Because it doesn't leave much after you do all the gear under the...
No, sir, I'll be coming back next month with the request for the RFP for the washers and the extractors. This is the amount that was put into the grant specific to protective clothing.
So it's just a coincidence they're same amount?
Yes, sir.
Okay. That was my question, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Chief, before you go, well, maybe it's not your question, but this does require a 10% local match.
Yes, sir. The local match, as articulated in the document, was going to be 10% out of the another grant code, the aid to locality grant code. No taxpayers' dollars or local taxpayers' dollars.
You have used the grant to pay the local match for another grant.
Yes, sir.
Outstanding. Thank you very much, Chief. I just wanted to make sure that was clear. Okay, so we have agenda item E. Is there a motion to approve agenda item E?
So move, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Seeley, seconded by Mr. Popowitz. Discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Motion carries. I was just looking, Mr. Parton. Who's seven? Mr. Fincham? Mr. Fincham, are you agenda item 7, the joint land use study for AP Hill? And if you are, would you please come forward? We're going to skip to agenda item number 7 because we've actually caught up quickly. So agenda item number 7 is the update on the status of the AP Hill joint land use study. Mr. Fincham.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, on September 24th of last year, we presented the joint land use proposal to the Board of Supervisors for your consideration. At that time, Chairman Rozelle had requested this item be brought forward to the board, and it was our recollection, based upon the reading of the minutes, that it was the general consensus of the board to go forward, although the board took no formal action on the proposal. We are at a point now where there's been additional discussion related to the joint land use study. As I mentioned in the memo, back in April, we had a meeting that was hosted by the town of Bowling Green with regional representatives as well as DOD representatives. They requested that the participating localities make a commitment as to whether the localities wanted to proceed with the joint land use study. Prior to actually making any further commitment on the behalf of the board, I thought it would be appropriate to come back to the board, make sure that the board was still interested in proceeding with the JLUS. Mr. Underwood is now the representative for the Reedy Church District, and I thought it would just be appropriate to come back and make sure the board still is committed and that it will involve significant staff time preparing the documents and going forward with the proposals.
Okay, before you go on, Mr. Fincham, what are the, I guess, the negatives of not participating?
Well, I think one of the concerns that's been expressed over the years, and I think was brought out several times at the meeting, was the concern that it would be a one-sided process in favor of the military installations. And certainly, historically, that has been a concern of communities. I believe Mr. Seeley had raised that concern, that they typically looked at areas adjacent to the military installations and not so much activities within the installations. I believe Mr. Manster's email, where he outlined the position of town council, reflected the concerns of all those present at the meeting in April, and probably would serve as a good starting point for any resolution to be considered by this board in going forward. And ultimately, certainly you can read the guidance document that speaks to implementing recommendations from the joint land use study. Oftentimes, joint land use study looks at open space preservation adjacent to military facility boundaries. Mr. Popowitz has expressed concerns about not restricting potential economic development opportunities around the military installation, things like that. So certainly I think historically it might have been construed as a one-sided process. I believe all of those attending the April 15th meeting expressed that concern quite well.
Okay, so realistically, we're being asked to come to the table and talk to the military rather than being told this is what's going to happen. We at least get some sort of dialogue as it's happening.
Yes, sir. The idea is that it would create, an ongoing dialogue there between the participating localities and Fort AP Hill. Certainly, I think, as was expressed by the board previously, we would want AP Hill to look at its activities and how it might modify land uses within AP Hill versus just looking at land use modifications outside of AP Hill. If the board does, again, decide it's appropriate to go forward, the next step would be developing the resolution, which I could have back to the board for your June 14th meeting. And we would also be coordinating with the other localities, Spotsylvania, Port Royal, Bowling Green, Essex, some of the other localities in the preparation of that resolution.
Okay. Does the board wish to continue with the joint land use study? Oh, I'm sorry. Questions, Mr. Underwood?
Yeah, Mr. Fenton, in terms of indirect cost to us, in terms of staff.
Yes, sir.
Time, what's your estimation or prediction of how much staff time is going to be needed to fulfill this obligation should we go forward?
Estimates that we've received for actual project costs for preparation of a J-Luce run between $250,000 and $300,000. So 10% of that would be $25,000 to $30,000. That would not strictly be Caroline County. I think that would be a portion amongst all of the participating localities. But probably somewhere in the range of, my guess is, and if you're looking at an 18-month study, $15,000 or so worth of staff time.
I just think that it sounds like a lot of time, a lot of hours when we're already short-staffed. That's when we're pulling folks in different directions. I'm just hoping we're not spreading ourselves too thin. That's my only concern. As I hear us discuss positions in the county and what we've reduced, and that's my only concern.
Okay, I'm not necessarily sure. I'm sure Mr. Fincham would disagree, but I'm not necessarily sure we're short-staffed to the effect that we're going to not do some other things because we're doing this. And I'm not saying this is purely busy work and whatnot, but tell me I'm wrong, Mr. Fincham, if that's the case. I mean, you could, without impacting any other projects or normal duties, you believe you could participate in the joint land use study?
Normally, we would have one or two planning processes underway in any fiscal year or calendar year. For example, we've done sub-area plans. We've done, try to do one sub-area plan a year. We currently don't have any sub-area planning processes ongoing at this point in time.